The morning my husband handed me divorce papers, I was standing in our kitchen making his coffee the way he liked it. 2 sugars, a splash of oat milk, stirred exactly 7 times because he said it tasted different otherwise. I had been doing that for 4 years. I set the mug down on the counter. He set the envelope next to it. Neither of us said anything for a long moment, and then he said, "You knew this was coming." I didn't. I really didn't. His name was, well, it doesn't matter what his name was. What matters is that he was a man who had married me at 28, when I was bright and eager, and convinced that love meant making yourself small enough to fit into someone else's life. By 32, I had gotten very good at being small. I had quit my job as a graphic designer at a firm I loved because his schedule was unpredictable, and someone needed to be available. I had stopped seeing my college friends because he found social obligations exhausting. I had learned to need very little space, very little noise, very little of anything that was just mine. The papers cited irreconcilable differences. He had another word for it, delivered 6 days later over a phone call I hadn't expected. "I need someone who challenges me, Natalie. You've just kind of stopped growing." I held the phone against my ear for a long time after he hung up. The apartment was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. We didn't have children. That had been a source of tension for the last year of our marriage. Not because we disagreed on wanting them, but because month after month nothing happened. He had suggested, gently at first and then not gently at all, that maybe the problem was on my end. I had gone to 3 different doctors. All 3 told me the same thing. There was nothing wrong with me. When I brought this back to him, he shrugged and said, "Well, something's clearly not working." He never got tested. I never pushed hard enough for him to. That is something I have had to sit with. I got 30 days to vacate the apartment. It was in his name. Most things were. My sister lived 4 states away in Phoenix, and I called her the night after he left for his business trip. The one I now understood was not entirely a business trip. And she cried harder than I did. She said I could come stay with her. I said I'd think about it. I didn't go. I had lived in Asheville, North Carolina for 4 years, and it was the only home I had left. I wasn't ready to lose it on top of everything else. I found a rental on Craigslist. 2nd floor of a duplex on Maple Ridge Road. Month-to-month lease. The kind of place that smelled like old wood and someone else's cooking when you first walked in. The landlord, a retired postal worker named Mr. Hensley who lived 3 streets over, told me the unit had been vacant for 2 months and that he'd replaced the bathroom faucet before I moved in. He did replace it. That small kept promise meant more to me than I could explain at the time. I moved in on a Thursday in early March. I had a mattress, 4 boxes, a lamp that had been mine before the marriage, and a rubber tree plant my sister had shipped from Arizona as a housewarming gift. The note taped to the pot said, "You're tougher than you think. Water once a week." My downstairs neighbor knocked on my door the following Saturday morning. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with the kind of quiet in his posture that comes from having learned not to take up unnecessary space. He was holding a plate covered in foil and he said, "I heard you moving in last week. I made too much banana bread." He said it like it was a practical problem he was solving, not like he was introducing himself or being friendly. Just, "There is extra bread. You are a person. Here." His name was Sam. I said thank you and took the plate and he nodded and went back downstairs. I stood in my kitchen eating banana bread over the sink and felt, for the first time in weeks, like a human being. We didn't become friends immediately. He wasn't the kind of person things happened immediately with. But over the following weeks, I started to notice small things. The way he shoveled the front walk after a late-season snow without being asked and did mine too. The way his dog, a big, quiet shepherd mix named after some Civil War general I immediately forgot, would sit at the top of the stairs and wait for me to come home in the evenings. Not excitedly, just patiently, like he was keeping watch. One afternoon in April, my car wouldn't start. I was standing in the parking strip behind the duplex, staring at it with my hands in my coat pockets when Sam came around the corner with a bag of groceries. He didn't say anything, just set the bag down and looked at the car and then at me. "Do you need a jump or do you need a ride?" "I don't know yet," I said. He got his jumper cables. The car started. He went inside. It was that simple with him. Everything was that simple. I had been divorced for 11 weeks when my ex-husband showed up at the duplex. I don't know how he found it. I hadn't given him the address, my sister hadn't given it to him. He must have gone through mutual friends or done something more deliberate that I don't like to think about too much. He stood on the porch with that particular expression he had. The one that looked like patience but was actually the threat of impatience, and said he wanted to talk. I let him in because I didn't know how to not let him in. That was the version of me he had trained. He sat on my thrift store couch and looked around the apartment in a way that was supposed to make me feel ashamed of it. Then he told me he'd been thinking, that he'd been hasty, that he missed me, and that he thought we could try again if I was willing to make some real changes. He listed the changes. I sat in the chair across from him and listened, and somewhere around the third item on his list, something about how I needed to be more engaged with his career and his goals. I heard footsteps on the stairs outside and then a knock at my open door. Sam was standing there with his dog. He wasn't looking at my ex-husband. He was looking at me. "Hey," he said, "ready to walk to the farmer's market? I told you I'd carry the bags." I had not asked Sam to walk to the farmer's market with me. We had not made any such plan. He knew that. I knew that. My ex-husband did not know that. I stood up. "Yeah," I said. "Let me get my jacket." My ex-husband left. He texted me twice from his car and then not again for 3 weeks. And when he did contact me again, it was through a lawyer about the division of some joint assets I hadn't even known. We still had to sort through. I let my sister help me find an attorney in Asheville. She found a good one. I told Sam what he had done for me that afternoon. We were sitting on the front steps sharing a thermos of coffee because neither of our apartments had outdoor space and it was finally warm enough. He shrugged. "You looked like you needed an exit." "I did," I said. "Thank you." He nodded. Then he said, "You don't have to explain anything to me." That was the thing about Sam. He never asked me to explain myself. He never pushed for information I hadn't offered. He had his own quiet, and he kept it, and somehow that made me feel safe enough to fill some of the silence voluntarily. I learned things slowly, in pieces, the way you learn things about someone you live near rather than someone you're trying to impress. He had been in the Navy for 8 years. He'd gotten out at 30 and come back to Asheville because his mother had been sick, and then she'd recovered, and he'd found he didn't know how to leave again. He worked remotely. Something in project logistics. He was vague about it in a way I attributed to introversion rather than secrecy. He cooked on Sundays and always made too much. He read thick paperback novels with broken spines. He called his mother every Thursday at 6 o'clock without fail. In May, he helped me hang a curtain rod that I had crooked drilled into the drywall on my own. He didn't comment on the damage. He just filled the bad holes with spackle and drilled new ones. "You're going to tell me I did it wrong," I said. "You did it wrong," he said. "The rod's up now, though." I laughed. It surprised me. It had been a while since something surprised me like that. What I know now, that I didn't understand then, was that I was healing in the specific and ordinary way that you heal when you're not being watched. No one was monitoring my progress. No one was waiting for me to be better so I could be useful to them. I was just living. Badly at first, and then less badly. And then one day in early June, I realized I had gone 3 full days without rehearsing the list of things that were wrong with me. I had been doing that list silently since the marriage, checking the items like inventory. I stopped checking. In June, my ex-husband's attorney sent over paperwork related to a joint account I had genuinely forgotten about. Money from a tax refund that had gone in and never been moved. It was just under $4,000. My attorney told me I was entitled to half and could fight for more given the circumstances of the marriage. I took my half. My ex-husband's attorney sent a note that said my ex-husband felt this was generous. My attorney told me what she thought of that characterization. I liked my attorney. The same week, I got a call from a design agency in Asheville. A small one, 4 people. The kind that did branding for local restaurants and mountain tourism companies. They'd found my portfolio online, which I had updated more out of restlessness than ambition. They needed a freelancer who could come in twice a week. I said yes before they finished the sentence. I told Sam that evening. He was on the front steps with his dog. I sat down next to him. I got a freelance contract today, I said. He looked at me. Good, he said. It's small. But it's yours, he said. Yes. That was exactly it. Somewhere in July, without either of us naming it, something changed. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't show up at my door with flowers. I didn't confess something at midnight over wine. It was more like the thing that had already been there just became visible. He stopped leaving after he came upstairs. I stopped pretending I needed a reason to go downstairs. We watched bad television on his couch with his dog between us, and eventually without the dog between us. I told my sister in a phone call she received with an embarrassing level of enthusiasm. She asked me 14 questions about him. I answered 11 of them. The other 3 I didn't have answers to yet. One evening in late July, his phone rang while we were cooking dinner in his kitchen. He looked at the screen and stepped out onto the small landing at the top of the stairs. I couldn't hear what he said, only the tone of it, clipped, professional, different from his regular voice. He was back in 3 minutes. Sorry, he said. Work. What exactly do you do? I asked, not accusatorially. It occurred to me I had been deliberately not asking for months. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, project logistics, like I said. But mostly I consult on contract work for large infrastructure projects, public and private. Mostly government adjacent. That's still pretty vague, I said. It is, he agreed. He turned back to the stove. I'll explain more if you want. It's not interesting in the way I think you think it might be. It's a lot of spreadsheets and compliance reviews. But the money's good, he said simply. I filed that away without examining it too closely. My ex-husband had made money the center of everything, the measure of worth, the argument he won by default in every disagreement. I was still calibrating what it meant when money wasn't being used as a weapon. In August, I got a phone call from a blocked number. The man on the other end said he was a private investigator and that he had been hired by my ex-husband to compile information on my activities, current living situation, and personal associations. He told me this because, he said, he had a daughter, and something about the situation hadn't sat right with him. I sat down on the floor of my kitchen. He's looking for something to use in a legal challenge to the asset division, the investigator said. I don't know if he'll find anything useful, but I thought you should know someone was looking. I called my attorney immediately. She was angry on my behalf in the precise, useful way attorneys are. She made 2 calls. By the following week, my ex-husband had received a letter that I was told made him go very quiet. I told Sam that night. He listened without interrupting, which was what I needed. Then he said, he hired someone to follow you. Yes, because he's angry that you're not sad enough. That had not been how I'd framed it to myself, but it landed somewhere true. I think so, I said. Sam was quiet for a moment. Then he said, he's going to hear from some people. I didn't know what that meant, and I said so. What I know now. Sam had spent 8 years in naval intelligence. What he did now was not, in fact, primarily spreadsheets and compliance reviews. He consulted for federal contractors and held 2 security clearances I didn't know existed, and had professional relationships with people whose job descriptions didn't fit neatly into titles. The project logistics work was real. It was also the most mundane part of what he did. He didn't tell me any of this the night of the phone call. He told me slowly over the following weeks in the same way I had learned everything about him. Pieces offered quietly, without performance. What happened first was that my ex-husband's attorney called my attorney and announced that he would be dropping the challenge entirely and wished to have no further contact. My attorney relayed this with controlled professional satisfaction. What happened second was that I found out my ex-husband had been investigated. Not by Sam directly. Sam was careful to explain that he hadn't done anything illegal, that he had simply made available, to people who were already aware of my ex-husband's business dealings, certain informations that confirmed what they were already looking into. My ex-husband, it turned out, had been doing something with company accounts that his business partners would very much have liked to know about, and that the relevant regulatory bodies had now been quietly alerted to as well. Sam told me this on the front steps on a cool September evening, his dog's head in his lap. You didn't have to do that, I said. No, he agreed. Did you do it for me? He thought about that for a moment, actually thought about it, which was something I had come to love about him. He didn't give automatic answers. Partly, he said, partly because it was already a thing that needed doing and I was in a position to help it happen. I looked at him for a long time. I want to be angry at you for not telling me, I said. I know, he said, but I'm not. He nodded. He scratched his dog behind one ear. The sun was going down behind the ridge. October was when I realized I was late. I didn't tell Sam immediately. I drove to a CVS 2 towns over, which was irrational but felt necessary, and stood in the aisle for longer than was probably normal before buying 3 different tests. I went home and took them in the order the pharmacist's leaflet recommended and sat on the bathroom floor and called my sister. I'm scared, I told her. Of what specifically? She asked. That it's not real, and that it is. I had been told by my body and 3 doctors and my ex-husband's passive certainty that I was the problem, that I was what wasn't working. 4 years of that math had settled somewhere deep, and now here was something that interrupted the math entirely. It was real. Both tests confirmed it, and then the third. I told Sam that evening. I knocked on his door and stood there when he opened it and said, I need to tell you something and I don't know how you're going to react, and I need you to just let me get through the whole sentence before you say anything, he said. Okay, I told him. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Then he stepped back and held the door open and said, Come in. We sat at his kitchen table for a long time. His dog lay on the floor between us. He asked me a question or two. Not the kind designed to assess liability, the kind designed to understand how I was. He was measuring what I needed, not figuring out what this meant for him. That was the difference. At the end of it, he reached across the table and put his hand over mine. I'm here, he said. Whatever you want. I'm here. The pregnancy was complicated enough early on that my midwife referred me to a specialist at Mission Hospital in Asheville. I went to my first appointment expecting routine paperwork and came out with information that took me several days to fully absorb. There was more than one heartbeat. There were, in fact, 2. My sister flew in from Phoenix that weekend. She sat on my couch and held my hand and said, twins, approximately 9 times in different tones of voice, as if she were testing which inflection would make it feel real. Sam came upstairs that evening. He had already heard. I'd called him from the hospital parking lot because I needed to hear a calm voice, and his was the one I reached for. He brought food from the Italian place on Lexington that I had mentioned once, weeks before, that I'd been wanting to try. He sat on the floor with his back against the couch while my sister and I sat on the couch, and he listened to us talk. And occasionally he said something useful, and it felt, family is the wrong word for something that knew, but it pointed in that direction. My ex-husband found out about the pregnancy through the Asheville social network that is smaller than anyone who lives here pretends. He called me. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that I describe only as revealing his priorities clearly, and my attorney added it to a file. He tried to contest paternity, or rather his attorney sent a letter suggesting he might want to, before anyone had established that there was any claim for him to contest. My attorney responded with a letter I was not shown, but which I understood, from context, was thorough. He went quiet after that. The girls were born in April, 3 weeks early, which the doctors said was typical for twins, and which I understood intellectually without it, making the first 72 hours any less frightening. They were small, and they were loud, and they were, according to every nurse who rotated through, doing great. I held them, and felt something reset in me, some calibration that had been wrong for years. Sam was in the waiting room for 11 hours. I know this because my sister reported it to me approximately 4 times while I was in labor. In a tone that I understood, she felt made a particular argument. She wasn't wrong. My ex-husband did not come to the hospital. He did send an email through his attorney, withdrawing the paternity inquiry. My attorney forwarded it to me with a single sentence note. This is over. It took until the girls were 3 months old for the full scope of my ex-husband's professional situation to resolve publicly. The outcome was covered briefly in the local business section of the paper. A settlement, a fine, a resignation from the company he'd told everyone he'd built. I read the article twice. I didn't feel satisfied exactly. I felt finished. My sister had extended her stay so many times that she eventually just sublet her Phoenix apartment and moved into a short-term rental 2 miles away, which she said was temporary and which I believed less every week. Sam and I got married in November in the backyard of Mr. Hensley's rental duplex, which Mr. Hensley had agreed to with a seriousness that suggested he felt personally responsible for how things had turned out. There were 12 people. My sister was there. Sam's mother was there. She had driven from Charlotte, and she spent a significant portion of the afternoon holding one of the girls and looking pleased about it. There were no speeches, because neither of us wanted speeches. There was good food and the kind of light that happens in the mountains in autumn when everything turns gold. The dog wore a bow tie that kept sliding sideways. Sam's mother's friend took photos. Afterward, when most people had gone inside, Sam and I stood in the yard in the dark for a few minutes. "I want to ask you something," I said. "Okay. The morning you came to my door with that banana bread, did you know then that this was going to be whatever this is?" He thought about it the way he thought about everything, honestly, without rushing. "I knew you seemed like someone who needed a good neighbor," he said. "That's all?" "That was enough to start," he said. In the mountains in autumn, that answer was exactly right. We moved the following spring into a house on the other side of Asheville. 3 bedrooms, a yard for the dog, a studio space off the back that I converted for design work. My sister helped us paint the living room on a Saturday in April, while the girls supervised from a blanket on the floor. She stayed for dinner. She drove home to her rental 2 miles away and texted me from the car. "I'm not going back to Phoenix. Are you going to make it weird if I stay?" I texted back, "Stay." I think about the woman standing in her kitchen at 6 in the morning, stirring a mug of coffee she hadn't been asked to make, counting to 7. I think about what she believed about herself. I think about the particular cruelty of coming to see yourself only through the frame of someone else's disappointment, and how long that frame stays, even after the person is gone. What I know now is that the frame was never accurate. It was just the one I had been handed and had held for a long time, without questioning whether it fit. The rubber tree my sister shipped from Arizona is in the corner of the studio now, taller than it was, which I think means I've been watering it right. I water it once a week. That part, it turns out, wasn't hard.